say yes. I need you to do more and say less. I won't just say yes. I need you to do more and say less. I thought you knew that anybody can do that.
I was thinking about you yesterday when we were having this conversation using the P Diddy story as an entry point to kind of examine what we have for decades kind of turn a blind eye to as a culture, you know. Um, and and I wonder, because we had one call, but I've had a lot of calls in the past when we've talked about whether it's R. Kelly or whatever, defending, well, we don't know. It's not. And I'm looking at my YouTube comments today. I was like, oh, he's not convicted. He hasn't even been arrested. And I was like, that's not what this conversation is. It's not whether he's innocent or guilty in the court of law. It's whether we as a culture are okay with this behavior. Well, these are grown people. These are consenting adults. Some would say no, if drugs are involved, it's not a consent. But I don't even want to argue that. Why are we okay with this? Is this something people aspire to? So this is what I landed on. If you're defending this, is it something you either want to do or you have done? So you're defending yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what does that say about us? If you have the audacity to call up a live radio show on, live and defend something with your full chest, or be in the YouTube comments with your full chest, basically telling on yourself, because there's only two ways, either you're in alignment with it because you've done it, or you're okay with the behavior.
Yeah. And even if people haven't done it, the fantasy of doing things is so powerful. Things that you wish that you could do, or you admire people who have done certain behaviors. The other thing that is very much a part of this conversation, your conversation yesterday, today, whether it's R. Kelly, it's P. Diddy, it's Bill Cosby, it is the movie.
What, Freaknik? You didn't go to it, did you, Doctor?
No. Our guy, Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think the question is, what are we really admiring, and what are we protecting? This whole thing of, well, people are grown, and people have asked me what I think about all of this, and I said, well, a part of what I'm really thinking about is whether whoever did what they did, there is something about being able to observe ourselves doing things. And once you start, it's like physical violence. If you hit someone one time in a, domestic violence, it is quite likely you will do it again and again and again and again. And most of us can agree that putting your hands on your partner is wrong. It hurts, not just physically, but it harms the soul of the other person. So it's interesting that when we bring sex into this, and sexual violence and sexual violation, that we get very twisted about what is acceptable and what is not. And what I would ask the audience today to do is to pull back and take a larger look at how people got into what they are into. I mean, dominating, masochism, sadism. I mean, and what that means is I either like giving pain, or I like receiving pain, or some combination of that. And so I would ask us to really question, how did anyone get attached and addicted to either wanting to harm sexually? Because sexual violations are usually not sexual in nature. They're about power.
Power. Yeah, I was going to say. Yeah.
It's about power. It's about dominating
So
someone.
it's what I can get people to do these things, and that's the get off.
It is not only can I get them to do it, but they're terrified of me. And so if you feel small as a person, if you were made to feel small, if you were raised being told that you're nothing, and you become, quote unquote, something, a lot of money, a lot of access to things. Part of what people move into is not just access to toys and cars, but they begin to use people as if they are part of the chessboard of their own power. And so we're talking about deeply injured and insecure people who harm other people and
Is
get
that
off on it.
I, I'm looking, I'm thinking, I'm going in my Rolodex right now of people who are in power. I look at I won't name names. Tech tech giants
Mhm.
who were teased or even brutalized by their parents. Is stories, right? Brutalized by their parents, made to feel small. Now you're the richest man in the world, one of the richest men in the world, and there's who's going to check you because you can
Mhm.
literally buy anything and anybody. You have complete autonomy. And this is like there's more than one. You know, they were saying Steve Jobs was horrible person as well. You know, and so while they've given us so much, as I have an Apple computer, you know, it's like we have Apple phones, but the person, you know, was horrible. We can talk about, Mackenzie Scott's ex-husband and all, you know, there's like even Bill Gates cheated on. How you gonna cheat on Melinda? Like who's but and then there's Epstein Island, which also now there's a whole place where everyone from a prince from England to all these captains of industry, including Donald Trump, can come and have a smorgasbord of young girls that you could never get if you had to actually build your character. Because why would you want a young girl, number one? But if you had to actually navigate interpersonal relationships with women, you would have to develop because
Yes.
you couldn't just.
Yeah, the word you used, you'd have to develop. And what you're saying is you'd have to grow up. You'd have to grow up emotionally. So a lot of these men and some of the women who have
Yeah.
also been a part of the sex slave trade are people who are children. If you look at priests who have, and nuns who have sexually violated children, if you really look at who they are, these are diminished. Now, they are adults and have to be held accountable as adults, but developmentally, they're like children who find someone weaker than them to lord over, find someone weaker than them to feel empowered by. And so they won't find an equal. They're not going to go and find you or me. You know, they're going to find someone that they can scare.
Mm, mm.
Yeah.
And that is also a huge industry. Somebody said the three pillars of modern capitalism, is drugs, guns, and sex.
Yes.
And human trafficking is a $150 billion industry, according to UNICEF. Trafficking is the second most profitable illegal industry in the United States. Um, sex, child sex trafficking has been reported in every single state in the United States of America. And there were 88 million child sexual abuse cases. How is that possible?
Yeah. How is
And
it?
this is as of 2022. That is ridiculous. And um, you just think about that. 50, nearly 50 million people in modern slavery worldwide. 35% of them are children. And sex trafficking is the most common type of trafficking in the United States, according to
Mhm.
Polaris. This, but supply and demand, right? This is what we're told about capitalism: supply and demand. There's a demand for this, right?
Yes, there is. Yes. And not only is there a demand, the same way we talk about racial disparities, racism, white terrorism, um, we must look at who raised us. The same way we have to check, who's going to check me?
Who's going to check me, boo? Yes.
Right. Who's going to check me, boo? Well, the thing is that we must look at who are the parents. And if it's our nuclear families, then we look to see who raised us, a mother, father, or a father, not a mother, a mom, and pop, whomever. The same is true for this sex trade. That we, meaning I'm talking about the nation, that is in denial about many parts of our shadow, doesn't want to own that it has produced a culture of sexual addicts. Because that's what we're talking about. This isn't somebody, having sex with one or two people who are their peers. That's why when you have callers and they're saying, well, these are consenting adults. No. Usually not. That's not who predators pick. They don't pick an adult. They pick someone who is vulnerable and who is afraid. And I also hear, and Karen, I know you've heard this on the show, you and I have heard this, where women are being blamed and saying, well, they did it. They should have known better, or they were for sale, and there is some, we as women do have to look at what we are seduced by. And I don't mean sexually, I mean power and money, and not recognizing that there is a price for giving yourself to someone who wants to enslave you. And we've seen this with so many celebrities. But the truth of the root of this cancer, if you will, this addiction, is to look at what it is that we are really subsidizing. Because it is not sex. Again, it is a way of exploitation of human beings. That's what this is about. It's about power. It's another way to take marginalized people who are on the fringe in some way, and use them to build your own insecure self up. And we don't want to look at that. We don't want to see, how did we become drugs, guns, and sex addicts in all three areas?
What's the cure?
Well,
what's the cure? Let's
spend
some time. Let's spend some time with it, because I want to go to break. I want people to sit in what you just said.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the cure, the healing. 866.
And let's ask them to also think about, who's going to check me, boo? I mean, see, that question is also for you to ask, who is going to check me about what I'm doing and how I do it? And I mean, who's going to check me, boo? And if we don't have somebody that can check us, and if we can't check ourselves, we end up with just what we have.
The problem, though, is what we have has gone unchecked for 30, 40 years, right? So then it became the norm. Here's the problem, right? So not only was it the norm, it was rewarded, right? So if those of us who have always been observers, because I've always kind of been in a seat of observance of what was going on, almost like a record keeper, you in your mind, you're like, somebody's going to stop this, right? Somebody's going to stop this. This can't. And then you see they get invited to the things, and then they get awards, and then they get contracts, and then they get money, and then they're elevated. People die, and then they get elevated again. And you're like, wait, so there's a reward for this? So the message now is, this is the norm. And everyone who's not doing this, there's something wrong with you, right? If you want to live your life a certain kind of way, you're corny, or you're, fill in the blank, because they got a lot of names for people. You're a simp, or you're this, poor Russell Wilson, look at, he's corny, he's a simp because he's in love with his wife and he wants to get married before sex, and this is but if your future, that's great. How many babies mamas, and even that, we have terms for that, and we celebrate it as if that's our culture and that's normal. And it's not normal, but then there's the defense, because if you're doing it, you don't want to be checked. So you're like going to defend it with every fiber of your being, because then you have to do so. You're responsible for that behavior. If there's something wrong with it, then there's something wrong with you. And no one's admitting that. So you're the person that's bringing it up is the problem, not me who's doing the behavior. We got to sit with that. Let me take a call before we go to break. 866-801-8255. And I think that's my greatest frustration. You know, grown people live your life, but at some point, the messaging and the mirroring for our babies, for the young people that are coming up, is that this is the way, the truth, and the light. That this is the pathway to success and wealth and power. That this is the way that you, and if you're not participating in it, then you'll never be. This is it. You got to be a part of this club. Got to have the accoutrements with that. And for the boys and the girls, it's like I've been saying, how do you tell a young person, go to school, get a good job, find somebody you love, get married, what? Nah, I don't have to have an education. I got a Ferrari. And I'm in with this group. Yeah, I might be being exploited, but look at my bank account, All right, let me take Ian in Arkansas, who's been holding on. Thank you for calling 866-801-8255.
Thank you for taking my call, Karen, and I listen to you, Dr. Robin, every Sunday. I'm so glad to get you on as well. I'm from the South. We got a lot of problems. We got a lot of hurt down here. A lot of women have been hurt in the church, also the church organization. So some of the things, when you're talking about R. Kelly and Bill Cosby and all those men, they are out of line. But we've been so hurt. Our boys, like Emmett Till, what they did to him. Some of our minds are not old enough to say, as you said, we look at it and say, well, they did it to me or they did it to my son. We've lost a lot of boys down here to prison. We've lost a lot of boys to rapes in prison. We've lost a lot of girls, adultification early. I know we all have gone to school. What Trump said, we grab them by the pussy. We had to be escorted out of the school for the socials on Friday and Saturday night. We had to grab other arms to take us. Can we walk out with you? Because that's what's going to happen to us. So in this mirror that we look at, like with Cosby, some of the stuff we did take, but those were young women. And also, we read the information. Some of them have been paid. Okay, they've been paid and they're grown women. We can't feel like Karen. Okay, Karen came. I hear her talking about they played big with her mom and her dad. She was in a different situation totally. We down here where we've been sharecropping and we've been, slaves, and we came from plantations. My family, my uncles, in their obituaries, they're talking about the plantations where we came from. So see, down there, we're still healing from that. So our boys that have gone, they putting boys in prison down here at 13. So when these mothers hear some of this stuff, they think R. Kelly was okay because my boy, and then Clay Kane does the Normalization show. So see, we already know the setup. We know, we thinking, I heard that woman Cassie had a week before she was going to do her suit. Who's behind her? Who told her she had a week?
Let me just, again, I feel like what I'm hearing is that everything that has ever happened comes into play when we have these conversations. And it's hard for us to tease out this from that. Like there becomes this massive, and I'm not saying everything's not connected. I'm not saying Emmett Till's not connected to this, but it becomes so difficult to digest what it is that we're, getting to the root of it when we throw everything into the pot, because it's all trauma, right? But what happened to Emmett Till has nothing to do with what's happening to Puffy. These are not the same situation, which I'm seeing. Just like what they did to Emmett Till, or just like, no, it's not. It's not. It's absolutely not. It's not. It's just not. And how do we have this conversation, Dr. Robin, when at the core of it is something that could be very personal to Ian, Arkansas, or whomever's listening? You have your singular situation that happened to you that you're triggered by what you're hearing, or may be similar. But how do we have these conversations when everything gets put in a pot?
Yeah. It's interesting and so important that we don't use our history the part that we chose, the part that we didn't, the part where we were victimized, the part where we were victors, but that we don't use our history as an excuse to being checked and to checking ourselves. And so a part of how we have this conversation is to say, there's a lot in my stew, and there's a lot that has happened to me, and there are reasons why I could have gone left or right, and maybe reasons why I did. But who I am now, if I am really checking myself, I'm choosing. And so there is something about understanding. And I think this is what we really don't want to do. We don't want to understand that we are choosing, maybe not always consciously, but we are making decisions every single day to use drugs or not, to use and traffic women or girls or not. And so there is something, and Karen, you talked about how normed this has become, that it's now, it seems like this is the norm. And if you are not doing it, then something is wrong with you and you need to just go, sit down somewhere and be quiet because everyone else is good with this. And it reminds me of like a cult, like Jim Jones, and some people may be too young to remember that, but it doesn't matter what cult, that if you can get someone to drink cyanide and call it Kool-Aid, if you can get someone to be raped and call it something other than what it is, that is really what we're talking about. We're talking about the ways in which, and that's why this show is so important, that people are uncomfortable right now as they hear you and me. And it's a good thing for all of us to be uncomfortable about the way in which we are living in a sexualized, addicted environment, and we want to excuse people's behavior and talk about racism and black men. Look, I just wrote a book with Courtney B. Vance, The Invisible Age. My research 30 years ago was on adolescent African-American boys. So I mean, this is not new to me, and I'm not new to this game. And if we take the trauma of Black boys and men and make it the reason why they are both harmed by people and then turn around and continue to harm other people, that means we have actually said yes to being still enslaved. So if people really want to be free, then you have to start saying, if I am trafficking, and I can call it something else, but let us now call a thing a thing. If I am using girls, and I've told myself somehow that that is acceptable, there's something damaged in me. And so I'm hoping today people are listening all over the country and world, thinking about their own behavior, the behavior of the people who they are hanging around, the things that we ignore, that we know aren't right, but we don't say anything about it. I think today is, and really whatever happens with Puffy, the truth of the matter is it's an opportunity, whatever his journey is. We talked about this with Wendy Williams. That's Wendy's journey. And we lift her up and we want, this is Puffy's journey. But for those of us who aren't on that course, it's for us to ask, what is it that I need to do differently? Me. I mean, what are you running? What game are you running on people? Forget Puffy for a minute. And ask yourself as a man. I was talking to somebody in my family who said, I would never, and they were ranting and raving about how they would never be with a young person. And I said, what are you talking about? Do you think I'm so old I can't remember? What are you talking about? I mean, come on. Like, I've watched what you did. And I watched who you did it with. And I didn't quite know everything. but I knew enough to know that these girls were too young to be with you.
Wait, you called somebody out in real time?
Yes, I did.
Oof. Oh, this we
Somebody
don't
in
do
my
that enough,
in
Dr.
my
Rob. You
family.
better do that.
Yeah, in my family, because they were on their high horse about how they would never. So because they don't have organized sex trafficking, they haven't figured out how to monetize it. I
Right.
said, come on, come on. I
Oh my
mean,
goodness.
you can't play a player in that way. Come on, what are you talking about? And so, you know, that he got quiet. I said, I mean, let's just tell the truth. You have been with young girls. And you don't want somebody doing that to your daughter or your grand. And see, this is the other thing. Somebody would kill somebody for doing that to their child, and yet they will do it to somebody else's child. So we've got to start being completely uncomfortable about what it is we are doing that we don't want somebody else to do to us.
Whew. You done said a word today. 866-801-8255. Dr. Robin is in the house. There's a doctor in the house. The Dr. Robin Show, you can catch that on SiriusXM Urban View Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern. And The Invisible Ache, which deals with a lot of this trauma and how to how to heal from the trauma. Stories are compelling and heartbreaking at the same time as liberating. All of that is in The Invisible Ache with Courtney B. Vance and Dr. Robin Smith.
I won't just say yes. I need you to do more and say less. I won't just say yes. I need you to do more and say less.